Welcome to our channel. In this video, I'd like to talk about a process every single one of us started as, but almost nobody actually understands: how your body builds a sex cell from scratch. I'll cover what gametogenesis actually means, how it splits into two completely different stories depending on whether you're looking at sperm or eggs, why a woman is born with every egg she'll ever have while a man makes new sperm every single day of his life, the strange biological pause that some cells sit inside for literally decades, what can go wrong along the way, and why. Despite looking like two totally separate processes, they're both built on the exact same underlying trick. So, let's get started. What is gametogenesis really? Most people hear the word reproduction and picture the moment sperm meets egg, but that moment is really just the finish line of a much longer, much stranger race, one that in some cases started before you were even born. Gametogenesis is simply the process of making gametes, the sex cells, sperm in men and eggs in women, and it all begins with the same starting material, a small population of cells called primordial germ cells. These cells form incredibly early in development and then do something almost nobody pictures correctly. They physically migrate, traveling from outside the developing embryo all the way to where the future testes or ovaries are forming, arriving there to set up shop as the founding population for every sex cell that person will ever produce. From that identical starting point, though, the process splits into two wildly different paths, and the differences between them are honestly more interesting than the similarities. The sperm story, a factory that never closes. In men, the process is called spermatogenesis, and it runs like a factory that opens at puberty and simply never shuts its doors again. Inside the testes, the primordial germ cells mature into spermatogonia, cells that sit along the outer edge of tiny coiled structures called seminiferous tubules. Starting at puberty, these spermatogonia begin dividing constantly, some of them staying behind as a permanent reserve so the supply never runs out, while others push forward into the maturation pipeline. Those cells, now called primary spermatocytes, go through a specialized kind of division called meiosis, splitting their genetic material in half not once but twice, first producing secondary spermatocytes, then spermatids, before finally reshaping themselves into the sleek tadpole-like sperm cells most people picture. That entire journey, from a dividing spermatogonium to a fully formed sperm cell, takes roughly 2 to 3 months, and here's the detail that surprises almost everyone: it never actually stops. A healthy man is manufacturing new sperm on a rolling basis from puberty into old age, producing hundreds of millions of them every single day. The egg story, a supply that's already finished. Now flip to the ovaries and almost everything you just heard gets reversed. In women, the process is called oogenesis, and instead of running continuously, it front-loads almost all of its work before birth. While still developing inside her own mother, a female fetus's primordial germ cells multiply rapidly into oogonia, and by roughly the 5th month of pregnancy, she already has somewhere between 6 and 7 million of them, the largest number of egg-forming cells she will ever have in her entire life. From that point forward, the number only goes down. Those oogonia begin meiosis just like their male counterparts, but then something happens that has no real parallel in sperm production: they stop. Partway through the first round of division, the cells, now called primary oocytes, freeze in place, arrested in a kind of biological suspended animation that can last for decades. A baby girl is born with roughly 1 to 2 million of these paused primary oocytes already sitting inside her ovaries, and by the time she reaches puberty, natural attrition has already whittled that number down to somewhere around 300,000. From puberty onward, only a small handful ever gets released each month, typically just one at a time, and each one waking up from a pause that in some cases has lasted well over 30 years. The moment a paused cell wakes up. Here's a detail most people never picture correctly: the pause doesn't end quietly, it ends with a surge. Roughly midway through each menstrual cycle, a hormonal spike triggers. One selected primary oocyte to finally finish that long-stalled first division splitting into a secondary oocyte and a smaller disposable byproduct called a polar body. That secondary oocyte is the cell actually released at ovulation, but it isn't finished yet either. It immediately starts a second round of division and then pauses again, this time waiting for one specific trigger and only one, fertilization by a sperm cell. If that fertilization never happens, the cell is simply lost with the next cycle, still incomplete. If it does happen, the final division completes in an instant, releasing a second polar body and leaving behind a fully mature egg, ready to combine its genetic material with the incoming sperm. Why the two systems look so different? It's worth pausing on just how strange this asymmetry actually is. Sperm production starts from scratch every single day, discarding almost nothing and generating an enormous surplus, because a sperm cell's only job is to travel and deliver genetic material, so the body treats it as expendable and cheap to replace. Egg production works the opposite way, investing enormous long-term resources into a small fixed supply established before birth, because each egg carries not just genetic material but an entire cellular support system needed to nourish a potential embryo through its earliest days, making every single one biologically expensive. When the process breaks down, given how differently these two systems are built, it's no surprise that they tend to break in very different ways as well. In men, spermatogenesis can be disrupted by heat, hormonal imbalance, certain medications, or age, but because the factory keeps producing new batches, fertility issues here are often at least partially reversible once the underlying cause is addressed. In women, the story is different because oocytes have been sitting paused since before birth. They accumulate DNA damage the longer that pause lasts, which is a major reason why the risk of chromosomal abnormalities, including conditions like Down syndrome, rises noticeably with maternal age. The eggs aren't being freshly made late in life, they're simply the oldest surviving members of a supply that peaked decades earlier, back in the 5th month of pregnancy, inside a woman's own mother. Two processes, the same underlying trick. So now that we've walked through both stories, let's bring it together, because underneath two completely different timelines, one continuous and one almost entirely front-loaded, both spermatogenesis and oogenesis are built on the exact same underlying trick, meiosis. Both start from an identical population of primordial germ cells that had to physically migrate into position before any of this could begin. Both rely on that same specialized division to cut the chromosome number in half, ensuring that when sperm and egg finally combine, the resulting cell ends up with a complete set rather than double the normal amount. And both, in their own very different ways, are essentially long-running production lines, one built for constant renewal, the other built to preserve a single irreplaceable stockpile from the moment before birth all the way to the moment it's finally called upon. Wrapping it up. There you have it. Spermatogenesis and oogenesis, two processes that look almost nothing alike on the surface, a factory that never stops versus a vault that was sealed before you were even born, and yet both quietly built on the same biological blueprint underneath, the same starting cells, the same specialized division, and the same ultimate goal, producing a single cell capable of carrying the next generation forward. Every person watching this video started as exactly this, a pause cell waking up at just the right moment, meeting a cell that had only just been made. Thanks for watching, and our uploads a new science video every day. Please subscribe and share.